Okay, this is the second part of the chapter 3 video content, and this is recording the crime scene, particularly the photography and video information. So chapter 3 includes notes, sketches, which I did previously, and the videos linked here. And this video is for photography and video uh, recording, documentation of the crime scene, and I'll put the link here. So crime scene forensic photography. The court rules for a photographer to be admissible as evidence in court. The photograph must represent the crime scene as found without manipulation or bias. Any recreations of scenes or manipulation must be documented. So, for example, if you did a close up or you changed the lighting for a particular reason, that has to be documented. All photographs must have bearing on the case in question and must not engage in emotional manipulation of the jury. So, forensic photographs do not stand alone as evidence. They are used with notes, sketches, and physical evidence. The admissibility of photographs in court. Law enforcement agencies ensure the admissibility of digital crime scene photographs by saving the images to writable, not rewritable, discs by lossless compression. So there used to be these discs that you can't write over, and that's what they'll be saved on. Saving enhanced or altered images as separate files, so you don't mix the originals with the close-ups or the enhanced images. Keeping a detailed and accurate photography log, and this is hugely different from what you see on TV. The investigator just comes to the crime scene and starts like taking pictures all over the place. You have to keep a detailed record of each individual photograph that you take. And finally, submitting testimony from the crime scene photographer as to the accuracy of the digital images. So the photographer has to submit an affidavit that, the images are accurate. Digital images should be in RAW format so that they are easily manipulated using computer programs and may not show an accurate depiction of the crime scene. So there's two types of formats, lossy and lossless. So lossy compression, which are your typical JPEG pictures, that you might take just of friends and whatnot. This condenses the files by discarding or throwing away some of the image information, like the little pixels that create the image. They throw some of that away to make it a smaller file, and that information is lost during this compression and can never be gotten back again. So if you save your image in a lossy compression format, you're going to lose some data or information and you'll never get it back. So JPEG records 256 levels of brightness. And so here's the difference between a JPEG and a RAW format. Lossless compression, which is the RAW format, condenses the files without discarding information. And for this reason, all digital crime scene photographs should be saved by lossless compression to avoid losing any important information contained in those images. So RAW format records 16,384 levels of brightness. And so in both of these images, you could see the difference. So much more detail, obviously, if you have a lot more levels of brightness. Also, the file format is going to be much, much larger, you can imagine, but required for photographs used as evidence. Other considerations for photography are that they have to use a digital single lens reflex camera that has interchangeable lenses and other accessories such as flashes, tripods, other lighting. The camera should have a manual override so that the photographer can manually manipulate like the amount of time, that the aperture is open, etc. The aperture, which is the size of the diaphragm opening to allow light to enter. The f-stop controls the aperture diameter, which is basically the amount of light. These are just some terms you need to know. The shutter speed is the length of time of light exposure. And other considerations, as we said before, are lighting and filters and things like that. Crime scene photography. Photographs are taken at the crime scene should show the layout of the crime scene. So you first take an overview of the whole crime scene, like kind of a far away overview picture. You can see here, kind of a big overview picture so you could get, outside surrounding areas. Then a mid-range of, say, the evidence, and then a close-up of the evidence. So all these three pictures are just to take a picture of that one bullet casing. You show the point of view of the victims, suspects, and witnesses. So this looks like almost a witness, probably, viewpoint, but you might want to take it from different angles to show the viewpoint of victims and suspects. Show the original location and condition of items of evidence at the scene. So right as it lay at the scene, you don't like pick it up and take a picture in your hand or something, just the way it was at the scene. Okay. So some of the photography equipment includes the camera, obviously, with lenses. There's a bunch of different lenses besides these two. Tripod, logbook, that's very important. Measuring devices, evidence markers, camera flash, and camera filters. So those are all kind of shown here, but all very important for forensic photography. The DSLR cameras are designed for professionals and advanced amateurs. They have interchangeable lenses. Look at all these crazy amount of lenses. The single lens reflex design and features resolutions between 16 and 20 million pixels or more. They have a greater depth of field. That means that more things will be clear. If it's far away or close up, the depth of field means, what range of distance is going to be clear in your photograph. Like for the older cameras, like you might be able to get 3 or 5 feet is clear, and then all of the background is kind of fuzzy. Well, that's not a good depth of field, right? It has accurate composition, SLR cameras, and most of the attachments are interchangeable with other cameras. So those are some of the advantages. Just to give you an idea of some lens selection, this is a wide angle lens. So it's used for landscape, indoor, and low light. And you could see, it goes from this range to a pretty wide range here. The middle distance lens is for sports photography and surveillance, kind of a little bit closer. And here's the telephoto lens, which you could get even, it looks like even closer, even though you're pretty far away. And it's used to surveil for surveillance and wildlife. Camera filters can also be very important for forensic photography. They attach to the front of the lens, and there are barrier filters which block a specific wavelength of light. They improve the contrast of fibers. There are bypass filters that only allow a range of wavelengths of light to reach the filter or through the filter. So UV filters, only UV light passes through the filter, which are good for semen, fibers, and fluorescent fingerprint powders. And then polarizing filters eliminate glare from glass surfaces, water, and other shiny tops. So you could see that with it, you can kind of see into the water a little bit, much more clear. Without the polarizing filter, all you get is glare. The crime scene photograph log is very detailed. A detailed log of each photograph taken at the crime scene is kept by the crime scene photographer. The top of the photography log form includes the case number, the type of scene, the date, the location of the scene, just like for your sketch, right? The description of the camera and lenses being used, and then the photographer's name and title. So very similar type of information, a little bit some specific, but as your sketches. And then each specific photograph has a description, you can see, and a time that it was taken. Here's the direction that it was taken from. Very, very detailed. Close-up photographs you need to take with a scale, right? They show the greatest detail of body or evidence. You use a macro lens at a 90-degree angle to the object, include a ruler for scale, and avoid shadows. So here's an example. That's another thing you don't see in TV, right? They don't specifically go to a specific 90-degree angle to the object, always use a scale. Those kinds of things are not shown in TV shows. So basic guidelines to crime scene photography: the photograph needs to be in unaltered condition. They should fill the frame, avoid shadows, photograph the scene in a logical sequence. So kind of like maybe as you're approaching, going into the center of the scene or something like that. And then you need to keep a log, a detailed log. So there are different ways to photograph things under different circumstances, such as tire and shoe print evidence, bloodstains, latent fingerprints, car crashes, arson, sexual assault, small objects, bodies and wounds, and bruises. And we're going to go through some of those. All right, so photographing of labile evidence should be done first. Labile, you remember, means evidence that could be changed or washed away relatively quickly. So you want to plan your route, and this might not be as easy as it sounds because you don't want to like step on the, on the evidence itself. You want to photograph the labile objects as soon as possible, and these include things like body fluids, which obviously could change, like dry out, whatever. Prints, impressions, these are snow print, footprints, and obviously mud prints. Fingerprint. You want to also photograph it before you make any kind of casts, or how they put like plaster on there to make casts of it. You want to do it before they make any casts. Tire and shoe print evidence should be taken at a 90-degree angle above the track or the item. Should include a ruler to determine tread distances, right? Because, it's kind of hard to tell perspective-wise exactly how big these things are if you don't have a ruler right there with it. And use a tripod to steady the camera. Again, 90 degrees, ruler, and tripod. How would you take a photo in the evening or a dark room? You use a flash or camera, or flash on the camera, sorry. Lengthen the time value, like how long the exposure is. This allows more time for the light to enter the camera, and use a tripod. Obviously, if you're going to have it light entering the camera for a few seconds, you don't want to be shaking, right? So use a tripod. Increase the ISO value, which makes the camera more sensitive to light. Those are 3 things you could do if it's in a dark scenario to be able to see more. Photographing bloodstains. You want the overview, the medium range to show orientation, and the location. If the bloodstain covers a large area, the area might be subdivided or gridded. You have to make note of where the grids are so you can, piece it all back together accurately later. Then you include close-ups with a scale. Include trace evidence found in the blood, such as hair or fibers. So if you're noticing there's some, stuck on hair or fibers in the blood spot, you want to include that. Blood stains detected with luminol must be photographed in darkness. And you might want to make a note of this. I think it's something that you could be quizzed on. You have to have like a 2 to 3 minute exposure to take luminol pictures, right? That's this one here. So you spray the blood or semen with the luminol. Then you have to set up your camera, turn all the lights out, open it up for like 2 to 3 minutes, And then that's when you get your good image. Otherwise, it's not going to show up well. Layton fingerprints, patent fingerprints are visible. So you do the overview, medium, and close-up. Latent fingerprints are not visible. So patent fingerprints would be like, you might find a print in blood, or somebody's hand was really dirty and left a print there. That would be a patent one. A latent fingerprint, you can't see it really with the naked eye. So this is where they put that powder on it, or sometimes they'll lift the fingerprint. So any fingerprints photographed before retrieval. Special fingerprint cameras are available, black and white, to show contrast. So here's this one Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez case. He killed 14 women in California. A young kid watched his car drive around the block very slowly and wrote down the plate number. Ramirez murdered another victim in the area, and police pulled a print off the car and identified Ramirez from that print. Okay, so, oops, sorry. Car accidents, or I should have changed this to car crashes. You should photograph where the vehicles are resting and photograph any approaches and retrace the path of where the accident occurred. So here's one of the actual car. Here's the path that it took and the approach that it was taking, right? So make a note of what is around the area. Also things like stop signs, crossroads, those are important. What the driver would have seen and when. So you go back kind of to where the driver would have been driving and what could he have seen. And then possible obstructions. So you should have a photo of the witness's point of view, include any tire tracks or skid marks, or other marks like on guardrails, etc. Include license plates, pedals, airbags, seat belts, speedometers, lights. Those would be more close-ups onto the car itself. Arson photographs, you have the overview, and it includes street signs, a medium, and then a close-up view for the arson photographs. Try to get the likely point of entry and the point of origin. So this is a point of origin photograph, and you could tell that because of this kind of V shape on the burn pattern here. It's the point of origin of the fire. The areas of fire activity, so wherever the fire actually burns stuff. Any evidence, if found, you want to take pictures of the specific evidence. It may require special lighting techniques and also include the crowd or onlookers if present. So that, from a timely standpoint, that might be one of the first things you take pictures of. Assaults. This is kind of interesting. You want to take, of course, the picture of the scene and the surrounding area, the position of the victim in relation to the scene, clothing, wounds the victim received, such as cuts, bruises, blunt force trauma, and definitely have respect and compassion for the victim. But this was interesting because depending on the light source, you might improve the visibility of the injuries. So this one was a bruising, right? So in regular white light, looks like this. You could barely see it there. In cross polarized light, you can see the wound here. But if you are, whoops, I can't see the bottom part of this thing. If you are using other forms of light, don't know why it's not, this thing has to go away. This thing go away here. Ultraviolet light shows really a really clean definition of the pattern here. Induced fluorescent light here, and infrared light you can't see anything on. Infrared is just like the heat pattern, so that's going to be the least. So the ultraviolet light is the most definitive, and you can see that there's actually a pattern here. So this person was hit by something that's triangular shaped. Bodies and wounds, injuries and weapons lying nearby the body. So here you should also take like an overview shot, of course, right? And then a medium shot to orient the body in the location. And then you're going to take injuries and weapons lying near the body. So that'd be kind of like the medium shot down here. And full body shot. The face is the most difficult because there's a lot of shadows in a face. So those can distort. So you're going to have to take a little care to take the face shot if you can. Include weapons if they're nearby the body. I said that already. Pool of blood should be included. And the surface underneath the body, once the body is removed, should be photographed. So this one, it looks like there's a nail or something stuck in that person's neck. All right, so those are the specific instances of photography. And I'll just a couple more slides on video recording. So video recording is required in some jurisdictions as a preliminary tour of the scene. They can include the entire scene and immediately surrounding area. They should include that. Long shots and close-ups are taken in a slow and systematic manner, and that can be an issue, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Movements should be logical and illustrate potential paths of entry, exit, and movement. So you don't just willy-nilly take the video, you move in and take the video as if you're entering or exiting the crime scene. Narration should be professional without extra talking or maybe turned off. Because again, it will be submitted in a court. So if you are taking video and somebody next to you is having a conversation, you don't necessarily want that to be on your video that's played in court. So you either have to be extremely careful or turn off the audio. And it must be, video recording must be combined with photography as well as all of your logs in your documentation and your notes. Video recording has the same considerations as photography, such as doing like an overview, mid view, and close-up view. They include this entire scene, immediately surrounding area. You should not manipulate the videography at all, or for emotional or whatever reasons. There are special techniques for different scenes, such as indoor, night, videoing, arson, etc. And some of the difficulty or disadvantage of using video recording is that it's sometimes difficult to keep the filming steady, although there are some, programs now that help minimize the shakiness of your video. Also, when you're zooming or panning, you have to do that very slowly, so it's not like jerky and unable to view. And then, as I said earlier, noise or conversations from ambient surroundings and others in the area, you have to be very careful not to include that in your video. All right, so that is the end of our second half of chapter 3, which is photography and video recording.